Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Tim Fogarty from Loci Landscapes. Tim's one of two directors at Loci, and it's a great story because he wasn't the founder of Loci, but joined the business, and it's a good example of partnerships when they work well together. They're often when there's two people with different skill sets, so not two people who have got the same skill set because they, for whatever reason, that never seems to work. But from my experience, seeing successful partnerships is always when there's people with different strengths, so that one can do something the other person can't. So it's good to see how well they're doing, and it's also great hearing that their local landscapes are native gardens, so design, construction, and maintenance, and purely natives, apart from the occasional edible. But they've got a niche that's what they do, and they don't stray away from that. So we talked to him about the pros and cons of doing that, and they've gone from having almost no PAYG employees when Tim joined to now having 14 or 15, about to put their 15th on. So, and that's within 3 or 4 years after he joined. So it's been a quick rise, but he also talks about some of the ways they've gone about doing that. So when they might not necessarily be looking for an employee, but someone applies to work for them, and they're such a good candidate that you make a position for them. I've heard plenty of people do that. So some good tips to take along from this episode. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Tim Fogarty. Tim, thank you for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
Ooh, you want the long version or the short version?
I go the long version, and I won't talk for 45 minutes.
Okay. Well, it's a funny story because it was by accident, really. I sometimes refer to myself as the fraudulent landscaper.
That business name was taken.
Yeah, I've had several previous careers before falling into landscaping. I won't go into all of them, but I came out of school and went straight into automotive petrol light, so becoming a mechanic. And that was because I was obsessed with cars, fundamentally, from a very young age. 15, 16, that's all we were doing. I got my license. I had my full license by the time I was halfway through my 15th year, I think, back in those days in New Zealand. So I was tinkering with, all sorts of different cars and just loved it. So in Form 6, which is would be year 11, I said to Mum, I don't think I should do my final year because I'm not going to do anything. I'll just mess around. So I may as well go and do a trade. So that's what I did. Went and did an apprenticeship, 4 years, became a mechanic. And on the day I qualified, I walked into my boss's office and said, "Thanks very much. I'll see you later." I was done. And I guess I always had a view to do something in the performance car world, not just work on Mum and Dad's Camry, which is what I'd been doing for 4 years. I qualified in a Toyota dealership, and I really enjoyed the experience, and I'm glad I stuck it out. There were wobbles certainly in year 3. I almost threw it in because of various reasons. I had a serious car accident, which left me fairly, I wouldn't say crippled, but I was on crutches for a long time. I'd broken a femur, and I was just a bit down and out about the whole thing. I had 6 months off, and I was like, maybe I'll just not go back. But my mother pushed me to go back. Thank you, Mum. I think me seeing out the apprenticeship was certainly the right thing to do. And I then went and sold cars for a while. I needed a change. I needed to get out of Rotorua, which was my very small hometown in New Zealand. So I said to my brother, "I just got to get out of here." And he said, "Why don't you come and live with me in Auckland for a while and get a job up here?" So I did. I got a job selling cars in Auckland. Wasn't that into that. I think I lasted 6 months, and then I said, "Nah, I'm jack of this. What's next?" My brother said, "Why don't you go to Australia? I've got a mate over there running a hotel on Hamilton Island, and apparently it's a good time." I was like, "That sounds good." So a mate of mine, a good friend, Trent from my hometown, he had just finished his apprenticeship. We put backpacks on, and that's what we did. We went to Hamilton Island, and I spent a year there. I met a girl, and never went home, or never came back to New Zealand. At least that was it. Australia became home. So did a year on Hamo, and then I left with that girl, and we lived in Brisbane for some time, and I did various different things. I worked for Virgin Blue, worked at a truck assembly plant, worked in audio visual, and then fast forward to, I think it was 2007, we left Brisbane, or 2008. And I ended up coming down to Sydney because my then partner got a job in Sydney. And that's where I met Mr. Charles Albone through mutual friends. And he and I became fairly thick fairly quickly because the girl I was with at the time and I didn't last. We split soon after getting to Sydney. And Charlie had just come through a breakup as well. And so we became running partners. We were bar hopping and partying and having a hell of a good time. And we ended up living together in Double Bay. And he was sort of, this was just around the time he was starting with selling houses, I think. He'd done I think I remember him shooting his pilot with his brother. So he was doing some landscaping at the time, and I was doing a few different things, and I did a bit of labouring with him here and there, and then ended up doing 6 months full time with him pretty much before I went to Canada. And that would have been in 2011. I went to Canada. So I'd done quite a bit of labouring with him, really enjoyed it. We had a good time together. He just started sort of Inspired Exteriors at that time. He was doing TV and Inspired Exteriors. I went to Canada, had a year there, and then I came back and worked back in the automotive world. I was doing importing. So I was importing cars from Japan and America with another friend of mine in Newcastle, and we were performing conversions. So we're converting the left-hand drive American trucks to right-hand drive and importing Japanese sports cars. And I loved that. It was a very, it was a cool time. We being a lover of cars, I was in my element. And then that lasted about 3 years. And then Charlie said to me, I was sort of getting sick of it, sick of the car thing, and I was looking at leaving, getting into something else. And Charlie said to me, this is around 2014, I think, hey, I'm going to the Melbourne Flower Show, the Chelsea Flower Show in London next year. You should come and build a show garden. And I was like, yep, that's left field. I don't know a thing about building show gardens, but it sounds like a good time, so sure. So that was the accidental fall into landscaping. And I mean, even though I'd done some previous, labouring with Charlie, I'd never seen it as a long-term thing. But I think the combination of working in a show garden situation with the time pressures, it's full on. And I think I'd missed a previous career. I worked in the racing world for a few years as well. I ran had a hand in running a Porsche Carrera Cup team. And we did tarmac rallying, we did track days, we modified exotic cars, and working in that realm, there was a lot of pressure, a lot of time pressure. You're dealing with fairly wealthy individuals who they just want results. They don't care about anything other but fix my car tonight. So we would work overnight often. If you had 3 crashed Porsches, guess what? You're not sleeping. You'd work all through Saturday night, fix the cars, get them ready for Sunday. So I found working in a show garden environment quite similar. It was full on. It was long days, and I thrived. Pre-family. That sort of 12 to 14, 15 hours a day. I loved it. I was right into it. So that experience, and I have to thank Charlie, and I do thank Charlie. Still to this day for inviting me to London, because that was the start of it. So we built the show garden, and then off the back of that, he said, hey, why don't you come and work with me full time and we'll grow Inspired Exteriors together? Because at that point, it was really just him and sort of a few subbies, helping put his gardens together. But he was struggling to balance his filming life, selling houses, with Inspired Exteriors. And he needed someone he could sort of trust to facilitate the installs, but not so much work on the tools, but sort of organise things. So, that's how I came into it. And I ended up doing a lot of working on the tools and labouring, and I was right into it. I was doing everything. Plus organising, subbies, and then it worked out. We employed our own staff, and it snowballed. So Inspired Exteriors, sort of began growing from then. 2015, we went back to Chelsea 16, did that again, did the London Flower Show, and again, wonderful experience, loved it. we got quite a bit of work out of that. We ended up building a rock feature wall in Singapore at the Shangri-La
Yeah, that's one of my
Hotel.
favorite projects. Like it's insane.
Sorry?
That's insane, that project.
Oh man, I got to tell you, it probably took a couple of years off my life, because it was. If I think back on it, it was extraordinary what we did back then, and even with I must say, the limited knowledge I had back then, it was we were flying by the seat of our pants a lot of the time, and it was engineered properly. Of course, we had engineers on our side; they had their own engineers over in Singapore, but it was a wild experience because working in another country, and you hear stories of working in Asian countries, the safety margins are a bit more lax. And we were certainly witness to that. Some of the stuff that went on, we were just like, this is wild, man. But it was awesome. We got to work on some really cool projects off the back of doing the Chelsea Flower Show. And Inspired Exteriors grew and developed, and we did, we were very lucky to work in the high-end resi space in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. We ended up having a design studio in the eastern suburbs where the business was based, and we built some incredible projects, Charlie and I, together over the years, and the business grew and evolved. We employed people, we had people leave, we developed systems and procedures, we made money, we lost money, we did all the things in small business, I guess, that can happen together. And, we still remain friends to this day. But it came to a point in, it was early COVID years, 2020. My wife and I decided to relocate to Tasmania. And we had decided, if we were to have another child, that we wanted to be closer to family support. And is from Tassie originally. So we duly did that. December 2020, we arrived in Tasmania. And at that time, Charlie and I had a loose plan that I would continue working in the business, but probably start removing myself from it and handing the reins over to someone else. So I think from memory, I ended up doing 4 or 5 months. And it was tough because I was flying between Hobart and Sydney, and I was doing a week on, week off. And I think Charlie, thankfully in the end called it. He was like, "You're not enjoying this, are you?" And I was like, "Not really, man. It's bloody hard." And he goes, "Dude, I get it. Look at me. I know this lifestyle with young family, flying around. It's not conducive to a harmonious home life. So shall we just call it?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So that was it. I left Inspired Exteriors, and I did a couple of different things here in Hobart, a couple of, let's say, not so great experiences with other employers. And it left me a bit despondent. I was a bit lost for a while.
Was that in the landscaping industry?
It wasn't. No, it was in residential building. So I had a mate that I knew from a hometown in New Zealand who was building here, and I worked with him for a while. And I was going to do a building apprenticeship because I was just looking at, I love construction, I love the landscaping thing, but I don't really know. I think it was just because I knew someone who was building, and he was like, "Come and work with me, man, you'll love it." It didn't work out, for a number of reasons. And then I had a brief foray managing a business where they did like pod style accommodation buildings, aluminium framed. It's quite kooky. That didn't work out. I won't even go into why. The owners were interesting people. And then after that, I was like, what am I going to do? I love landscaping. Why the hell am I not working back in landscaping? So I ended up looking at the market in Hobart and going, who's doing what? What businesses are here? What are they doing? What are they building? Is there anything similar to what I was doing in Sydney? And I happened upon Jethro Plunkett, JP, who's my now business partner, and he was running Loci Landscapes. And he had previously run another business called Van Diemen's Landscapes. He'd morphed into Loci, done a little bit of a rebrand, and focused on native gardens only. So that became his niche. And I looked at what he was doing, and I thought, he's building a cool product. I really like his gardens. It was very different to what I was used to. Charlie's style, far more I guess, formal, more English cottage gardening type stuff. With his background, he's English, obviously. All exotics, a lot of exotics, and I loved the gardens we built and still do. We built some incredible gardens together, and I loved that style. But when I saw Jethro's style of building, it was so different, a bit more rustic, very informal. And I liked the focus on natives. So I just picked the phone up, called him and said, hey, man, this is me. This is what I've done. I've sent you a resume. I've sent you a portfolio of the stuff Charlie and I did together. Do you want to have a chat? And he called me straight away. And I remember we had like a 45-minute phone call the first time. And we just got on like a house on fire. It was one of those serendipitous moments, We just went, wow. We hit it off, So we had a beer together and just a very informal chat. And I was very upfront about what I wanted to get out of that relationship if it was to work. And that was to venture into becoming potentially a part owner of the business. I wasn't backwards and coming forwards about that. I felt I was ready to be a business owner and to be a part of, with Charlie, it was almost that way. And we almost went down that road of me becoming a part owner. We just never got to it. It was Charlie's business, but for a number of those years, he just said, you do what you got to do. I'll trust you to run the business. And that's what I did. But I was never an owner. And, with years marching on, I was like, I've got to do something about my superannuation and my retirement. So for me, business ownership looked like the right passage for that. So I said to Jethro, if this works, I want to, look at venturing into a partnership. And he said, hey, man, I'm all about it. What Jethro lacked, at his own admission, was someone to come in and help with the business admin side of running his business. At his own admission, he was not into that. He hated it, didn't want to do it, was struggling to keep up. Typical sole trader lifestyle. You would have heard this many times before. He's on the tools, he's running subbies, he's running his staff, he's trying to answer the phone, he's trying to return phone calls, just a mess, really hard to do. What he did have was a demand for his product. He was getting this following, and people were wanting his style of garden and his native garden. In the early days when I joined him, I very quickly took over the inquiries, returning phone calls, the emails, and what was great about coming into Loci was I'd spoken with Charlie about taking some of the systems and procedures that were developed at Inspired Exteriors and plugging them into the business down here, and he was very supportive of that. So that's what I duly did. I had this huge file of stuff that we could plug straight into Loci because it didn't have any of that, and we could hit the ground running. So the first few months of me in Loci was literally plugging in a lot of those systems into the business and getting it up and running in that way. So
how many employees were there when you started?
So Jethro was running it. Typical story. He was a sole trader, and he basically had a lot of other sole traders or subcontractors subbing to him.
Yeah.
So he didn't have anyone as PAYG employees. So that was another first job for me, was to convert that structure into a proper proprietary limited company structure with PAYG employees, paying super, all the proper things, and cleaning all of that up. So that's what we did. And within a year, we had split the business 50-50 after we had done all those preliminaries and made it a proper proprietary limited company. And I think there would have been maybe 4 or 5, maybe up to 6 at times, depending on what project he was running, individuals all involved in building his gardens. And some other subcontractors. So when we went through this process of converting everyone to employees, proper employees, there was a few that, let's say, didn't make the cut. We ended up going through a process of some leaving. We re-employed. We hired some new people, and I mean that's still going on to this day. We've got largely a core group now, but a couple left recently for various reasons, and we've re-employed. But back then, yeah, I'd say it was around the 5 or 6 number, and we just started growing organically. And now it's about 3 years, I think, that we've been in partnership, and we're at 14, and we're about to add a 15th. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, I've got to say.
And I reckon some of those, like if they're working on a subcontractor rate and then going on to the PAYG rate, they would have thought that their wage is getting halved. So it would have been, even though, like, because that's how it works out pretty much. Like if you're from PAYG, it's pretty much double as a subby. So
Yeah,
that would have been them.
absolutely. Yeah. There was certainly a couple of guys who weren't really into that structure.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately, I think they did enjoy the flexibility offered too with working under Jethro as a subby.
Yeah.
You know, the early finishes, later starts, that sort of stuff. So, you know, which is understandable. You know, if you've worked under that sort of structure for a number of years, all of a sudden to go to a more formal structure with a you know, a definitely moving towards a more, I don't call it a big boy business structure. Some guys just weren't into it, and that's fine, you know. So yeah, there are a few departures and a few additions made, and over the years we've just grown the team. You know, at times we have targeted, you know, advertised and sought, advertised for roles and sought people. Other times people have come to us and said, hey, here I am. Is there a vacancy? Sometimes there hasn't been. And we've created roles because we couldn't pass up those opportunities. The last 2 guys I've employed in construction were like that. They've just popped up, and I've gone, man, we struggled for the first couple of years. You know, we really struggled to attract skilled landscapers. So we sort of bumbled along with what we had, and Jethro was, you know, on the tools full time still. I was still jumping in at times, working at the coalface. I was labouring in those early days and helping the team. But the business slowly evolved, and you know, I certainly don't do any of that anymore because I just don't have time. Same with Jethro. He's not on the tools anymore. He's sort of, you know, his role is design lead. He's the creative brains. I can't do what he does. In a way, very much like the relationship I had with Charlie. Charlie was the design lead, the creative brains, and my job was to extricate that information and create the design in a hard copy paper format, digital format within our design studio, and then facilitate the construction team to build it, and then the aftercare, the horticulture and maintenance. And you know, those years of working in that business gave me the tools to be able to come down here and do exactly the same, and you know, not make as many mistakes because I'd made a lot of mistakes and you know, learned the hard way with Charlie's business, and I'm still making mistakes to this day. You know, that's business.
Yeah.
You try things, they don't work. You try something else. You try things that does work. Hallelujah. You adapt that into the business and use it long term. And we're still doing that at the moment. You know, we're rolling out a project management system at the moment, which is, we're about 18 months in, and we're still developing it and still trying things, and some things work, some things don't. Yeah, it's a works in progress. And yeah, with the employment side of things, I didn't really see it getting to 15 staff at this sort of earlier stage, I suppose, but it just sort of has happened that way. And yeah, I'm very lucky. Jethro and I are both very lucky that we have an incredible team of really passionate people who are here for the right reasons. And I've always said to Jethro, I'm not interested in just putting bums on seats. I don't want people coming here and then, you know, not believing in what we do and not loving, you know, the reasons for being here and all that sort of stuff. Let's get the right people and take time recruiting them and making sure that they're the right fit. And yeah, I think for the most part, we've done a pretty good job of that.
So in the early days, did you sit down with Jethro and work and sort of say, this is where, like, where do you want to go? Where do I want to go? And see if they meet, or?
To a certain extent, yeah. Yeah, we did. I mean, we knew we wanted to grow the team, and we knew there was a demand there for what we were building. And I guess to go back to an earlier point, I was going to say around me starting to do the taking on the inquiries and the emails coming from people. It was fascinating to discover the amount of times people would say, "Oh, you've returned my call. Oh, thanks for emailing me back." And I'm like, is that unusual? And a lot of people are like, "Yeah, I've called 4 landscapers and you're the only one that's returned my call." Now, that was a stark contrast to what would happen in Sydney. In Sydney, in the eastern suburbs in particular, there are very good D&C firms up there who are on the ball. And even with Charlie's notoriety as a TV presenter, we had to hustle for business. We had to work really hard to get these jobs, because often there was competition, and there was a lot of very good firms up there doing the same thing. When I came down here and started being on the phone and emailing inquiries, and it was sales. I was doing the sales. It was interesting to find that. And I don't want to say it wasn't hard to grow the business, but it wasn't hard to grow the business because I was just doing basics that were normal to me up in Sydney, i.e. returning calls and returning emails and just talking to people, just being a normal dude, giving them the time, I guess, because Jethro wasn't able to do that when he was on the tool. He'd be like, nailing something or hammering, and he's on the phone and he's, hey, bring that head, shut that out. He didn't have, you're distracted. So being able to be on the phone, giving people the time of day and just talking to them about normal stuff, sharing stories of kids, or, I was really honest. Some of those days were hazy because I had a young family. So I'd be like, I didn't sleep last night, so forgive me if I'm a bit spacey. And, I might get a mum on the other end of the phone saying, hey, don't worry, I'm the same. Yeah. So I was able to very quickly grow a pipeline of work, which Jethro had never done. He's like, oh, this is great. I can see how much work we've got in front of us. I've never had that. Because he would sort of go from job to job, or get to the end of a job and go, who do I need to ring back to go to the next job? And he'd go through his phone and go, oh, that's right, that bloke called me 3 weeks ago. Hey, man, we can come tomorrow. Oh, right. And that's sort of how he survived. But then we brought a bit of formality into the business and had people booked in for consultations. We'd go out, do a formal consultation, create a design proposal, and all of the stages that we used to have at Inspired Exteriors, we pretty much adopted into this business and hit the ground running. And that's how Jethro and I started together. And now we work with probably anywhere from 6 to 9 months of work in front of us. And I was just counting before, I think we've got about 20 active design projects and similar in construction in various states of pre-construction being built, pipeline down the track. And it doesn't seem to slow up.
That's an insane amount of work. Like, I've got 6 to 9 months ahead of me as well, but I've got me and one employee. You've got 14 to 15 employees with the same time frame.
Yeah, it's a bit scary sometimes, I have to say, and I guess I'm one of those small business owners who gets paranoid about running out of work. I'm like, fuck, is the phone going to stop ringing one day? Are we all of a sudden, is there going to be a world war and it's all over? But it hasn't. And I think you've got to try, and I've worked really hard on this in the last sort of 18 months, is to stop, just block all that out, put your head down, your ass up, and it'll be okay. You just got to believe that it's all going to be okay. The work's not going to stop. I still look at ourselves as a very new business, and I remember hearing back, years and years ago, first 5 years of small business, 80% fail or something, and I guess that was still in my head, and I've got over that now, and I'm like, we're okay. We've advanced into, again, I refer to a big boy business, and I think we're all right. We've got a lot of work, and yeah, you're right, it is a lot of work, and at times I'll freely admit I've got myself in trouble because I've dragged it out with people too long. People have been waiting for designs, and they're 6 months in, and I'm calling them going, oh, it's another month or so. And part of that was we were doing design only jobs in the early days as well. And what happened with that was we were pushing those in terms of priority way down the track because we had to prioritise keeping our construction teams busy.
Yep.
You've probably heard and seen this before. So we've just stopped doing design only now. We just don't do it. We just focus on the core business, which is design and construct, and it works.
And are they still like predominantly native only?
Yeah, all native only. We of course have fruit trees and edibles as an exception to that rule, but and I found that quite hard to get my head around when I joined Jethro initially, because I was like, surely we've got to throw a few exotics in there, a few ornamental trees. And he's like, no, it's hard and fast native only. I'm like, okay.
Couple of New Zealand plants sneak in there.
Sorry?
Couple of New Zealand plants sneak in
a
there.
few New Zealand flax, bro. Yeah. Got to get a few New Zealand flax in there. Look, now that I've been doing it for quite some time, I tip my hat to Jethro for sticking to his hard and fast rule. And I think you would probably appreciate too now that there is quite a movement towards native gardens and natives only. And when we visited Mythicus last year, there was some awesome examples of native gardens. And on the business side, it was a clever move by Jethro, and whether it's intentional or not, to go native only, because we now have that niche. And there's a couple of other guys probably starting to do that down here now, but in the Hobart market, he was the originator. So people approach us for that service. They come to us because they know we build native gardens. And I guess that's another reason why we're so busy and why we have this pipeline of work, because people are prepared to wait. I feel embarrassed sometimes saying, oh, look, to be honest, we're probably 6 to 9 months away from making a start on construction. They're like, yep, that's fine. We can wait. It's all good. So, yeah, doing the native garden thing has been very successful for us. And obviously the reasons why and the ethos behind it, people believe in. And all of our staff are into it. They all really enjoy that niche that we have. On the hort side, we have 2 horticulturalists who are very passionate about their native plants, and they wouldn't be here if we weren't native only. And we try and plant plants that are endemic to the area that we're building a garden in. So to the point where, some of our growers will collect seed from the area or the site and grow on for us. And Tasmania, as you probably know, has some very special plants, and it's a very special place in terms of its local ecology and habitat for wildlife. So we're trying to foster that and educate people about the importance of bringing natives into the urban environment. So yeah, it's been I guess it's a feel-good story from an environmental perspective, but also it's allowed us to have a very successful business as well. So
yeah, it's good having a niche like that. Like, it's rather than just being like, for example, with my landscaping company, I just do anything. So there's no particular thing that I'm known for. So it's good to have that point of difference.
Yeah, I think it can work 2 ways. I mean, in one way, it can shut you out of other markets. So I guess that was my hesitation initially. I was like, is that a good move? Because are we going to run out of that niche-y type native work? But on the other hand, as you say, it can be very successful, and you can create this, well, they're the go-to guys for natives. And I guess my hesitation too was Hobart's not a big place. It's not a huge market. Has it got the ability to sustain a niche business like that? But turns out it does, and it will, and it has, and it will continue to, I think with the whole narrative of global warming and whatever you believe in terms of the reasons for that, and people wanting to build water-wise gardens and gardens that will look after our environment in the future, I think the native stance is a fairly good one. So yeah, I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. I hope it doesn't, because that's where we're parked firmly now, in that niche. And yeah, I'm enjoying it. I really enjoy it. I think, my early years of trying different things and different jobs, it's stopped now, because I love what I'm doing, and I can't see myself doing anything else but running this business. If anything, we might look at vertically integrating other businesses. There might be other opportunities, but still, within the landscape realm, maybe a nursery, landscape yard, that sort of thing in a similar vein. But yeah, this is keeping me busy enough for now.
Yeah. So what's the breakup of the employees? Like what you got 14 or 15. So what's everyone do?
We've got 8 in construction, I think now, and we've sort of worked. We had a big staff meeting yesterday actually, and a staff member raised that at times where there's 2 on site, it doesn't work quite as well. We've always had a magic number of 3 teams of 3. That's sort of what Jethro and I thought we'd work towards, and we're 1 away from that. We'll probably take on another apprentice potentially to fill that void. So we've got 2 apprentices in construction. 1 more would create that 3 of 3. So 3 teams of 3 in construction. We've got 2 in horticulture. We've got Jethro and I as directors. And then in the office, we've got a design assistant who helps Jethro create the plans, the concepts, and the digitalization, I guess, of what Jethro dreams up. Jethro draws. Bethany does everything else, puts it to paper, 2D plan and Vectorworks. We produce renders for probably 90% of our projects. We don't do that in-house. We work with a partner on that. We've brought in a admin assistant recently and that was something I should have done 2 years ago. I was being stubborn, and there were certain things I was still doing which I shouldn't have been doing, like typing up Word docs for estimates from a spreadsheet. I don't know, credit applications, just filling stuff out. I shouldn't have been doing that stuff for as long as I was. So I finally employed a admin assistant professional. She's an ex-lawyer. Mum, just returning to work. And she actually came from our deck builder, a guy that builds decks for us. He said, I see you've got an ad up. My wife would be perfect for that. So in she came, and I was like, why didn't I do this 2 years ago? Because it's just been a dream. And she's really helping drive the project management system with Trello. She's helping develop that. So that's been great. So that's sort of the split. And then we have, I've got a bookkeeper that works with us 1 or 2 days a week. It's obviously got a lot busier for her because there's a lot more payments being made, a lot more money moving. And then a number of subbies, we've got a lot of trusted subbies. So really the team is, 2 in hort, 7 or 8 in construction, 2 in design, plus 1 support potential. We're going to bring someone in to help Bethany in design, because with 2 new construction people this year, that sped the construction process up significantly. And then I started to identify that there was becoming a bottleneck in design, and Bethany was drowning. And I probably had the blinkers on for quite a while over that. And then I said to her the other day, I think we need someone else in design. She's like, oh, thank you. She said, I didn't want to ask you because, we're just taking on quite a few staff this year, and I didn't think it was on the cards. But I said, no, we need to do something about that. So we're advertising for someone. In a perfect world, we'd like to bring someone in-house and train them up in the way we work in our studio. But for now, we've got someone we're going to trial doing some drafting for us. He's offshore, overseas, Australian guy though. So we'll see how that goes. So that's really us. Yeah, a total of 15 at the moment. A couple in hort, mostly in construction, and then in the office.
And what sort of stuff do you sub out, like a deck builder?
Yeah. Before we had Dobbo, who's come to us this year, Danny, who's he came to us with 18 years experience at another landscaper in Hobart, and he can just do everything. He's one of those guys, man. He's just a machine. So he is doing some of our deck building now, but we will still sub some decks out at times, depending on requirements. So your deck building, excavation. So we've got our own excavator, but it's a baby. It's a 1.8 ton. So anything that's requiring, a 5.5 tonner we bring in. So we've got a guy that works with us. We build a lot of boulder walls, so big dolerite boulder retaining walls. It's a big part of what we do. So that's all a 5.5 tonner. So we could go down the road, I guess, of buying a 5.5 tonner, but I'm fairly limited on space where we are, so wouldn't really have. And it's just easy. This guy Craig's worked with Jethro for years, so he's very well versed in what we do and how we do it, and we can just trust him to be on a site just building boulder walls for us, So that works really well. And then all the usual stuff, sparkies, plumbers, whatever else, we just bring guys in.
And your horticulturists, so do they do maintenance, or what's their role?
So they are obviously, they're doing the plant outs. So we've moved probably in the last, 18 months, we've started to move towards there being more a division. How do I coin it? Not a division, but the design department is very separate to the construction department, is separate to the horticulture department, but they still interact very closely together. So I guess with the horticulture and construction, what used to sort of happen is we get towards the end of a construction job, we'd start, we've been probably prepping the site with soil and importing good stuff, and then everyone would do the plant out. Everyone would jump in, and there'd be a lot of fun on site because you get everyone in the same place. And now it's more the hort team will come in, during the build and do the site prep and soil prep, and do we need to bring in compost? What sort of soil are we going to use? Where's it going to go? And then the hort team now will sort of come in and plant that job out and take their time. And the set out is far more important now. They will take their time to set those plants out and make sure that the grouping of them is going to work long term. Because as you'll appreciate, I think that the grouping of natives and getting them to all grow together and create a form and structure which looks aesthetically appealing is a bit harder than exotics. Mm. So, we're starting to experiment with that a lot more. And what's nice now is we're seeing gardens that we built 3 years ago really mature now and going, well, that grouping really worked awesomely. That's not so much. So let's maybe pull a few things out there and change a few things and have another go. But that's sort of what we're moving towards, is the hort team is planting only. They're doing their plant outs. And yes, of course, the aftercare, the maintenance is a big part of what they do as well. And we would probably maintain, I would say, 80% of the gardens we build. So in the early days, we're only maintaining a few, but now, I don't know. We've probably got in excess of 25 to 30 gardens, I guess, we're maintaining regularly, and that's just going to continue to grow. So the addition of another hort, that only happened recently. And Tegan, who's been our main hort since day one, since I came on, she's, sort of morphing into more organisation, plant procurement. She still does get out on the tools, absolutely, but her role is sort of in the office as well now.
And what does Loci mean? Like, do you know the origin behind the name?
Yeah, it means of this place, and I guess it's a Latin term, and I think it's sort of the exact meaning. If you look it up in the dictionary, of this place, meaning, I guess, belonging to this place. So a big part of Jethro's garden design process is to design a garden that looks like it's meant to be there, settled in the land and has been there forever. And the use of native plants, of course, goes hand in hand with that. Jethro often talks about designing with the borrowed landscape in mind. So we have this, we're so lucky that we go to a lot of incredibly beautiful properties here in Hobart, and we work in the high end. So we're talking, water views. A lot of people always say, even my house, oh man, you've got a water view. It's like, to be fair, a lot of houses in Hobart have water views. But a lot of the places we go to, their acreage, they will have bush backdrops, water to look out on the mountain, Mount Wellington, Kunyani. And Jethro, often says to our clients, well, look at this backdrop you've got. This is your borrowed landscape. This is what I'm going to bring into your design. We want to try and reflect what is there within your garden. So that's that's a big part of the design ethos and bringing wildlife into the gardens. That's again what a lot of people come to us for. They want to bring in birds, bees. The wildlife, the marsupials is it's a tough one because some people want them, but they don't want all their plants eaten. So, and in the first couple of seasons when the plants are small and succulent, that's when they get demolished by the wallabies and everything else. So we have to protect all of our new gardens with wildlife fencing. Sometimes it's more permanent. We'll actually fence an entire property. And other times it's more local protection of garden beds. We'll just, use droppers and mesh to protect them for the first 2-3 seasons. Then usually they're right. You can pull that out and they'll still be browsed, but not decimated.
Yep. They're just thickening it up. They're doing some tip pruning.
That's right. Yeah, helping out the hort team.
Yeah. Have you had any, do you get people who are calling up wanting you to do a job for them and they're not the right fit for you? You have to knock them back?
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time. It's something Jethro and I talk about a lot is screening clients. And it's a skill I learned in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. Unfortunately, sometimes up there, we didn't have the luxury of turning some clients away, even though your gut told you it was not going to be a good fit. We sometimes had to still venture down the path of partnering with certain clients because we needed the work.
Yep.
And we just had to get it done. We are very lucky and fortunate down here that, I can turn jobs away because of the demand for our service. So, yeah, a big part of what I do in the initial stages is when an inquiry comes in, I want to talk to them. So we'll return their email or I'll return their phone call. If I still get a lot of phone calls directly to me, and if it's an email or a website inquiry, we'll get their number, I'll call them. And some of the screening is the job. What's the job? Is it a full D&C project? Is it just building a retaining wall? Because if it's just building a retaining wall, it's probably not us. I'll just pass that on to, there's a couple of guys that I refer a lot of work to, and, they're friends of ours and they're very thankful for passing that work on to them. But, I've toyed with the idea of having a small works team that will just go and do that stuff. But for now, we're busy enough doing what we're doing, and we're just, trying to focus on what I call businesses, which is design and construct. So our perfect job is someone who calls me and says, I love what you do. We've been following you for a while. We just want you guys to come in and do what you do. And there's no, okay, this is what we want. We want this over here and that there. And this is, it's more the client controlling what the design is going to be. It's that trust from clients that just know what we do, love it, and we'll just let Jethro do his thing. They're just like, you guys do it. You're the experts. Go hard. Those are the best jobs for us. So back to your question with, turning people away. Yeah, we still do it. There are I try and do the screening on the phone, and if it doesn't feel right, there's no point in going and doing a consultation, because a consultation is, myself, Jethro, we still do it, both of us, and our design assistant, Bethany, comes out and writes everything down.
Yeah,
and then it's passed over to Ashley, who does sorry?
Do you charge for that?
Yeah, we do, but it's a loss leader. It's not a lot of money. I think we charge just under $200 for the three of us to go out for an hour. So if you do the numbers, there's no value. There's no money to be made in that. We're losing money, but that's not the point. The point is to go out and establish, is it the right job for us? Are they the right client for us? Is it worth proceeding past that point? But if I've done my job correctly in the screening phone call, hopefully we know that client and that job is going to be right for us. But I get it wrong sometimes. There are certain clients that will sneak through the cracks, and we'll get to a consultation, and sometimes Jethro and I will be halfway through and we'll glance at each other and go, yeah, this isn't right. And then we'll get in the car and go, fuck that. And then you've got to think of a creative way of not going any further with that client. And, they say honesty is the best policy, but in some cases, I think you have to be quite creative with how you don't progress with those clients. And we've got, various methods of doing that.
Yep. Yeah, and you get better with it over time as well. So
You do.
get better
You
like
do.
screening
Yeah.
the clients.
I used to feel really bad about it, but these days I've got over that, and I just that Jethro. Yeah, the team is starting to roll in. Yeah, so, and I think it's very important. You can waste a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money working with the wrong clients.
Yep.
So you've got to get it right. And if you can, again, sometimes people who's, there's a couple of guys who, we're supporting at the moment. They subcontract to us for certain projects, and they're sort of just starting out. And I've said to them, well, does that client or that job feel right? And they're like, no, it doesn't, but we need the work.
Mm.
So sometimes you don't have the luxury of getting rid of people, but if you are in a position where you can, I strongly recommend you do it. And we definitely do.
Mm. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of when we were talking about how you got that niche. So and you're worried about it. Like you could take on those projects if you had to.
Yeah.
But if someone's starting out wanting to cut their niche, that can sort of slow you from creating it by taking on these other ones to kind of fill it in.
Definitely. And there were times in the early days when I just joined Jethro where there would be jobs where I'd say, oh look, they're really into us, but they do want to have exotics in the garden. He'll go, no, not happening. And I'll be like, yeah, but we don't have a full book, man. Like we should probably consider it. He'd be like, no. Okay. Yep. That's fair. You want to stay hard and fast to that rule. I respect that. And I'm really glad he did. He stuck to his guns. And now we don't have to worry about that.
Mm. Yeah. And you got to where you are now quicker by making those decisions.
I think so. Yeah, ultimately. Yeah. It was just that fear of, have we got enough work? Have we got enough work? We've got to feed the machine. We've got to keep the wage bill paid. Those early days, cash flow was so important, and it still is. But I think now it's not as crucial because we've got a buffer. I think building a business to a point where you've got a float, I call it a float in the account, where, if you don't invoice as much as you need to that week, it doesn't matter because you've got money in the tank. And look, on that subject, we do a little bit of commercial work, and the commercial jobs are always expensive to get out of the ground. We're into one at the moment for about 100 grand, and that's a lot of money out of your cash flow. And you've got to wait for it too. When you invoice a commercial client, it's end of month plus 35 days. So getting that money back in the kitty is very important, and we're in that situation at the moment. But we've been able to build enough cash on hand that we just leave enough in the bank that we're not so stressed about, shit, can we make wages next week? And it's a good position to be in. It's just not as stressful as it was in the early days.
Have you ever discussed having like a side business that takes on those other projects that aren't the native ones and call it a different name?
Yeah, we did discuss it early, but I think we want to stay true to our ethos. And although you could package it up and try and have it as something different, Hobart's a small place, and everyone would know it was us, I think. So, what we've done instead, I guess, is as I said before, there's a couple of guys who started out on their own recently in the last year, and one of them, he's a Kiwi fella. One of them I tried to recruit into our business a couple of years ago. And when we put the asset on him and said, look, man, if we take you on, we would like to hope that we get a minimum of a couple of years from you, because we're going to put you in a senior role, and there's going to be a lot of inputs into that and blah, blah, blah. And the color drained from his face. And I was like, you all right, bro? And he's like, oh, man, to be honest, I'm probably going to do my own thing in a couple of years. So I don't want to muck you about. And I went, well, I appreciate the honesty, man. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And from that day, we built a friendship. And Dan has become a trusted subby to us now that he's doing his own thing. He's out on his own. There's just two of them. And they broke ranks from another landscaper. And and now venturing on their own path, and I'm really supporting them. And a lot of the work that I get, the phone calls that are like, oh, we just want a garden enclosure built, or we just want a retaining wall, or we just want some steel edging, the small stuff. I'm just like, I just feed it straight to Dan. And he's loving it. You know, he's being able to really bolster his books with some of that work. So yeah, and again, you know, I do get sidetracked at times. I'm one of those individuals. My brain's always working. What else is out there? What can we be doing? And that's what I talked about before about vertical integration. I'm sort of like, what's next? You know, like this is humming along pretty well. You know, we're always tuning it up, but are there other business opportunities out there that I could be looking at? And that's probably more the direction I'd go if and when I have the time and inclination to do that. But again, you know, you can't get too excited about that stuff, I guess. And we're still only 3 years in, Jethro and I, in this relationship. So I don't want to get too sidetracked from the core business as well.
Yep.
And my wife would probably not be too happy if I started doing too much of that stuff as well. At the moment, we've got a really good balance, I think. You know, I'm able to take my kids to school at times or daycare, finish early if I need to. If there's a disaster at home and I'm needed, you know, I can be there in a couple of minutes. And we do have a you know, an understanding within this business that we don't want people doing after hours work. We don't want to do Saturdays. We don't want to do 10, 15-hour days. We want to have a good balance, and we want our staff to have a good life outside of work. So for the most part, we do, the staff do 7:30 till 4 days a week. They have an early doors on Friday. We don't do Saturdays. And we try to have, our site managers not doing stuff after hours and not updating chats and what they did that day. Some of them still do it because, they're passionate and they love it. And but I've been there, done that, bought the T-shirt. Charlie and I used to do some massive days in the early days of Inspired. We'd work 12 to 14 hours a day. But that was pre-kids, and pre-wife, and I could do that. Now, that wouldn't be very well received, Joel.
There are times where it makes your life easier by doing like a day like that every now and then to plan things. So, but as long as you're not doing it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, man, I still have to do it at times. I still have to, sometimes pull the laptop out after the kids are in bed and invoice. Like Wednesdays, I do my invoicing every Wednesday. And if we do consults one Wednesday a month. There's our in-house pooch. That's Moscow, Jethro's dog. Very famous pooch. Often see him on the socials. I've lost my train of thought now.
I'm talking about invoicing after hours.
Oh, invoicing, yeah. So sometimes I don't get invoicing done on a Wednesday because we've been out all day consulting. We'll drive around and do 4 consults one Wednesday per month. And I haven't done invoicing, so I'll have to be, laptop out after the kids are gone to bed, and I'm there till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, getting money in the door, which is one of my primary focuses. I learned very early in business, if there's one thing you've got to do, if there's one task that you must get to, invoice. Don't push the invoicing. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. Don't do it. Get the money in the door. Your cash flow is the most important thing in business. I don't know who I learned that from. I can't remember, but it's always stuck in my mind, and it's something that I'm all about. Get the money in the door because, we've got very strict terms, 3 days, pay me. So we invoice every week. Everything we do in the business is cost plus on the resi side. So we have agreed margin on materials. We have different rates for our staff. And it's all very transparent. It's all set up very early in the piece before we start a construction project. And on a Wednesday, that's my invoicing day. And everything's brought into zero. My bookkeeper does a lot of it. I just sort of come in, apply my margins, make sure the labour's right. I do a time report through Xero, make sure everyone's got their time in that project. Bang, invoice out. 3-day terms. So, and a lot of I never have a problem with people paying us down here because it's discussed very openly from the get-go. from when we meet a client, how we structure our do and charge process, how we invoice, how regularly we invoice, and it's 3-day terms. We need to be paid because we've got wages to pay and super to pay and PAYG and all the things. And staying on top of your cash flow is very important. So, and people respect that, you know, and I rarely get people paying late, which is nice.
Yeah. So how do you, if you do a cost plus, do you give them like an estimate on what the projects are going to cost?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So I still create a spreadsheet on every project from day one. So I get given this. See this. That's a takeoff sheet Bethany creates for me. So it's the 2D plan with takeoffs of everything that we're going to build. I'll put that into a spreadsheet, and yeah, it's fairly accurate. You know, the jobs that are hard to keep control of cost-wise are the ones 250 plus. So once you get, I've found, once you get over 250K, yeah, sometimes we go over. And look, most of the time we're on it because we're invoicing so regularly and we're tracking the job so closely through Xero. We can see it going sideways, and you know, it's things like, and you'll know this, excavation goes over. You know, you quote 5 days with a 5-tonner and you're there for 10 because there's rock in the ground or whatever. And those things you can foresee and tell the client and go, look, you know, it is what it is, and you can manage it and control it to a certain extent. The big jobs, yeah, we'll sometimes go over. I find, you know, and our sweet spot is usually 100 to 200. 150. We're doing a lot of jobs around the 150K mark. And most of the time, you know, we'll be 5-10% under, 5-10% over max. And we can see it happening and we let the client know. It's a win if we're under. And, you know, Jethro and I always wanted to build a business where honesty and transparency was forefront with our clients. And, you know, and there's some selfish stuff in there as well, because being do and charge, you never really miss out as well. You know, if you've got a firm quote and you go over, well, that's eating into your profit margin and your bottom line. Whereas if you're going over with an estimate and a do and charge scenario, you're still making the same margin. And we, you know, describe that to our clients in the consultation process about how we invoice and how we charge our jobs. And people appreciate that honesty and that transparency. And look, it's not for everyone. And I know, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, you can get more margin if you do a firm quote, you build heaps of fat into it, and then you smash the job out and you kill it. You might make 45 to 50% gross. We aim for, our target is always 35%. Some jobs we'll do a bit better. Some jobs we'll do a bit less. But we work on a 35% gross, you know, target range. And if we do our job properly, you know, this business will generate that, and it's very consistent. And we might end up with 10 to 12% net on our gross at the end of the year. And you know, that for us is a pretty good result. And our accountants are happy with where we're at.
Yeah.
And, you know, money's not the be all and end all for us. It's definitely not. Of course, it's important, and we need to be a profitable business in order to keep our staff employed, support their families. You know, that's not lost on me how important this is. You know, we're supporting 14 other families out there with mortgages and rent and kids and food and all those things. So it's very important that we do our job properly to remain a profitable business and sustainably long term. And I would like to retire at some point. So, of course, that is important as well. We're building this business with the hope that it might be a saleable product at the end of our tenure, Jethro and I, as well. And you'd appreciate this. That's with a design, construct, landscaping firm, it's quite a hard task to do that. Compared to businesses such as, I don't know, for example, what my brother's done, he's had 2 successful exits from pharmacy and then occupational health and therapy physio studios in New Zealand. Those were very saleable businesses, and they sold to private equity both times. I'm not going to sell this landscape design and construct firm to a private equity firm. That's not the model. And for the most part, firms like this are the owners. It's Jethro and I. We are the firm. But we're trying to build this business with a lot of systems and procedures that, are steadfast and there for the long term, so that this business can potentially be a saleable product to someone. And the dream would be that maybe some of the staff members buy it.
Yep.
That'd be awesome. And it continues. Loci just stays as a stalwart in the Hobart landscape market. That would be the dream. And we think we've probably got another, 10 to 15 years somewhere in us before we pull up stumps. It might be longer, I don't know. I mean, I really enjoy what I do. But that has been quite a focus, since I started. I sort of said to Jethro, it'd be nice to be able to build a business that we can sell. So, we're at the moment we're building a new website, putting a lot of money into a new website that, will grow with the business over those years and form a part of, what should be hopefully a saleable entity, in 10, 15 years' time.
Yeah. And I reckon, again, having that niche, it's going to get more people who are passionate about doing that. So then they're also the ones who are going to want to take that over rather than just being another landscaping company.
Definitely. Yeah, I think so. And I hope so. Yeah, I hope that is the case. And if it's not, that's okay too. Hopefully we will have made enough money during our ownership that we are able to retire somewhat comfortably at some point. We're making moves with that as well. This warehouse that we're sitting in right now, we're trying to buy this from the owner. Commercial property in the area we're in is quite difficult to buy. There's not a lot of it. Supply is limited. And now that I've got this beautiful situation where I'm very close to home and very close to the kids' school, I don't want to lose that.
Yep.
So the focus is to buy a property so that there's no potential for us to lose out.
Yeah.
So luckily our landlord's on board. He's like, yeah, absolutely. Let's have a conversation about it. So we're sort of in early discussions about formalising that and putting our profits into buying this warehouse.
Yep.
That's the first thing we'd like to do.
Last question for you, Tim. Who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast? Apart from Jethro, because obviously after talking with you, he would obviously sounds like an awesome person to have on.
Yeah, and I think he was just a bit scared, Joel, this time round to come on. He says he doesn't like, the limelight and he's a bit shy and all the rest of it. But funnily enough, he was on Gardening Australia last year or the year before, ABC's Gardening Australia, and he was great. He was
more people watch this, obviously, than Gardening Australia, so it's a bit more intimidating.
True. Look, we might get him on, mate, one day. Look, I can't think of... Yeah, there'd probably be a couple of people down here, maybe in the horticulture world, that I'd like to see you take on. There's some really good plant growers. Jono from Silver Banksia Nursery, he's an absolute legend of a fella. We work very closely with him. He grows a lot of stuff for us. I'd like to see him on it. Yeah. That'd be cool. Yeah, in terms of landscapers, probably none spring to mind. But yeah, in terms of partners, Jono would be awesome, I reckon.
Yeah, but I do like a plant person because they're pretty passionate about what they do. So.
Jono, man. Jono, Silver Banksia Nursery.
All right.
Don't know if Jono watches this, but sorry, mate, if I've served you up, but you could be a target, buddy.
Well, I absolutely love chatting to you. Like, that was one of my favourite chats I've had. So thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Oh, not a problem, mate. It's been my pleasure, Joel. And sorry it took us so long to line it up. But, I'm glad we've done it. And we'll see you at MIFGS. We're taking the whole team next year.
Oh, I'll give you a tour.
Mate, I'd love that. Yeah, we want a personal tour of your garden that I hear you're building all by yourself.
Yes, yeah. But it's only small, so it might be one at a time, maybe.
Okay. Why don't you get Charlie in on it as well, mate? Eh?
That'd be two people, otherwise I'd have to knock him back.
You don't want him on the tools, mate, I assure you. Sorry, Charlie. All right, mate. We'll see you at MIFGS.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. See ya.